Welcome to Big Idea Hardly, where you can learn something new in just a few minutes. Today, we study together The Profiteers, How Business Privatizes Profits and Socializes Costs by Christopher Marquis, in which we probe into the pervasive exploitation of societal and environmental costs by businesses to maximize profits, leaving the public to bear the burden. Christopher Marquis is the Senior Professor at the University of Cambridge Judge School of Business. Don't go away. Hardly the editor will be right back with the story. Today, we delve into a critical and often overlooked issue: how businesses systematically offload the hidden costs of their operations onto society and the environment. This practice allows them to maximize their profits while the public unknowingly bears the brunt of these expenses. The result is a distorted economic system that prioritizes short-term financial gain over long-term sustainability and equity. At the heart of this issue lies a key observation. Businesses have perfected the art of privatizing profits while socializing costs. This means that while companies reap the financial rewards of their operations, they skillfully shift the adverse consequences, whether environmental damage, health risks, or economic inequalities, onto the broader public. The problem is not just isolated to a few bad actors, but is pervasive across industries and has deep systemic roots. One stark example of this is the case of environmental pollution. Take, for instance, the story of General Electric, GE, and the Hudson River. For decades, GE dumped over 1 million pounds of carcinogenic polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, into the river, leading to widespread environmental degradation. When confronted about the cleanup, GE's then CEO Jack Welch dismissed the need for further action, arguing that the company had already done enough. He downplayed the risks of PCBs, despite overwhelming scientific evidence to the contrary, and balked at the idea of spending billions more on environmental remediation. This case exemplifies how corporations can evade responsibility for the environmental damage they cause, leaving taxpayers to foot the bill for cleanup efforts that span generations. Welch's response to the issue reflects a broader corporate mindset that prioritizes financial performance over environmental stewardship. The quote from the book encapsulates this. "There is no credible evidence that PCBs cause cancer," a statement Welch made that blatantly contradicted scientific findings. Another area where businesses socialize costs is through their labor practices, particularly in terms of wage suppression and the exploitation of workers. A particularly illustrative story involves the retail giant Walmart, known for its aggressive cost-cutting measures. During the COVID-19 pandemic, while Walmart's profits soared, many of its employees, including full-time workers, found themselves reliant on government assistance to make ends meet. The company's business model, which focuses on low prices and high efficiency, is built on a foundation of low wages, minimal benefits, and precarious employment conditions for its workers. This shifts the costs of social welfare, such as healthcare and food security, onto the public sector, effectively subsidizing Walmart's profitability. As noted in the book, in short, corporate America is pawning off the cost of rock-bottom wages on taxpayers. This situation exemplifies how companies can create an illusion of financial success by pushing the true costs of their labor practices onto society. The exploitation extends beyond just environmental and labor costs. It also permeates the financial sector. A third illustrative story revolves around the banking industry, specifically the predatory practices of payday lenders and the imposition of exorbitant fees on financially vulnerable customers. The book highlights how America's top 4 banks, including JP Chase, made billions in overdraft fees during the pandemic, disproportionately affecting low-income customers who were already struggling to stay afloat. These fees, while lucrative for the banks, contribute to a cycle of poverty and financial instability that affects the broader economy. In contrast, wealthier customers often enjoy low-cost or even free financial services, underscoring the stark inequality in how financial institutions distribute costs and benefits. The book underscores this disparity with the quote, "The financial industry is exploiting its own employees and customers while reaping immense profits." Furthermore, the concept of externalities, often used in economic discussions, is crucial in understanding how businesses offload their costs onto society. Externalities refer to the indirect costs or benefits that affect third parties who are not directly involved in a transaction. Negative externalities, such as pollution, are a common way businesses avoid bearing the full cost of their operations. For example, when a factory pollutes a river, the local community suffers from the degraded water quality, not the company that caused it. This allows businesses to continue operating profitably while society pays the price in terms of health issues, environmental cleanup costs, and lost economic opportunities. The problem with externalities is that they are not always visible or immediately recognized by the public. This invisibility allows businesses to operate with little accountability, perpetuating a system where profits are maximized at the expense of societal well-being. A particularly striking example of this can be seen in the fossil fuel industry. Companies in this sector have long reaped massive profits while contributing to climate change, a global issue with devastating long-term consequences. Despite being one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, fossil fuel companies often escape the full financial responsibility for the environmental damage they cause. This is made possible through extensive lobbying efforts, regulatory loopholes, and the deliberate spread of misinformation regarding climate science. This brings us to the role of government and regulation in addressing the issue of externalities. Governments have the power to impose regulations that hold businesses accountable for their environmental and social impacts. However, as the book illustrates, many corporations actively work to undermine these regulations through lobbying and political influence. The result is a regulatory environment that often favors corporate interests over the public good. For instance, despite widespread public concern over climate change, meaningful policy action has been slow and often watered down due to the influence of powerful industries. This creates a vicious cycle where businesses continue to exploit societal and environmental resources with little consequence, further entrenching the system of privatized profits and socialized costs. In addition to government regulation, there is also a growing movement towards corporate social responsibility, CSR, and environmental, social, and governance, ESG criteria. These frameworks encourage businesses to consider the broader impacts of their operations and to adopt more sustainable and equitable practices. However, as the book points out, many companies use CSR and ESG as a form of greenwashing, promoting themselves as socially responsible while continuing to engage in harmful practices. This is often done to appease consumers and investors without making substantive changes to business models. The book highlights the case of Amazon, which has been praised for its climate pledge but continues to engage in practices that contradict its public commitments. This disconnect between corporate rhetoric and reality further complicates efforts to address the systemic issues at play. The overarching theme in these stories is the deliberate obfuscation and exploitation of costs by businesses to enhance their bottom lines. Whether through environmental degradation, labor exploitation, or financial predation, these practices reflect a deep-seated problem in our economic system. The consequences of these actions are far-reaching, impacting everything from public health and social equity to the sustainability of our planet. The hidden costs that businesses offload onto society often go unnoticed by the public, making it difficult to hold these corporations accountable for their actions. In sum, the exploitation of societal and environmental costs by businesses is not just a byproduct of capitalism, but a fundamental feature of how many companies operate today. These practices are deeply ingrained in the corporate strategies that prioritize short-term profits over long-term societal well-being. By understanding how these systems work, we can begin to question and challenge the structures that allow such exploitation to continue unchecked. As the editor of Hardly, by learning these lessons, we can envision a future where businesses are held accountable for their full impact on society and the environment, paving the way for a more just and sustainable world. And perhaps most importantly, we must realize that the key to systemic change lies not just in reforming individual companies, but in rethinking the entire economic framework that allows these practices to persist. In revisiting our key point, how businesses privatize profits while socializing costs, it's essential to recognize the deep-seated impact of these practices on our society and environment. This pervasive exploitation is not just an abstract concept, but a reality that manifests in various industries, shaping the way we live and the challenges we face. One particularly telling example comes from the fast fashion industry. Brands like Zara and H&M have built their empires on the promise of affordable, trendy clothing, but the hidden costs are staggering. In one case, a factory in Bangladesh collapsed in 2013, killing over 1,100 workers who were producing garments for Western retailers. The building, known as Rana Plaza, had been constructed with substandard materials and was not designed to support the heavy machinery used in garment production. Despite warnings of visible cracks in the structure, workers were forced to continue their shifts to meet the demands of their Western clients. The tragedy underscored the extreme human cost of cheap fashion and highlighted how companies prioritize profit over the safety and well-being of their workers. The book quotes an observer who noted, "The true price of fast fashion is not the dollar amount on the tag, but the lives lost in the race to the bottom." This story reinforces our understanding of how deeply embedded these exploitative practices are and how they manifest in everyday products we consume. As we look to the future, it's clear that challenging these systemic issues requires a collective effort to demand accountability from businesses and a rethinking of our economic structures.